The twin suns burned over the rocky plains of Varnus, turning the air into waves of silver heat. Training fields stretched across the dust valley where young alien warriors of the Zarak clan stood in shining armor, waiting for their daily combat drills. Their armor reflected light like liquid glass, glowing in shades of blue and gold. They were proud, strong, and loud, their laughter echoing across the wind. Among them stood Karen, a young warrior with crimson scales on his arms and eyes like polished stone. He was proud of his strength and speed, believing that no off-worlder could ever match the power of a Zorak-born fighter. When the word spread that a human soldier had been assigned to train them, Karen felt nothing but amusement. To him, humans were soft beings from a weak world. When the human finally appeared at the edge of the training field, the crowd of warriors fell silent for a moment. He was tall but simple-looking, wearing a dull gray armor that had no shining lights or elegant design. His name was Captain Ryan Hale. His armor had dents, burn marks, and scratches all over it as if it had survived 100 wars. Compared to the polished exosuits of the Zaurak, his armor looked ancient. Karen smirked and whispered to his friends, "Look at that thing. Does he fight or fix machines with it?" His friends laughed loudly and even a few instructors smiled. But Ryan didn't react. He walked calmly to the center of the field, scanning every warrior with calm eyes. He didn't boast, didn't smile. He only spoke one line, and his voice was firm. "You laugh at what you don't understand." His tone silenced some of the warriors, but Karen stepped forward proudly. "We are warriors of the Zorak. You come from a gentle world. What can you teach us, human?" Ryan looked at him for a long moment. "I can teach you what happens when armor breaks and courage is all you have left." The alien youth burst out laughing. He thought the human's words were just pride from an old fighter. "Then show us," Karen shouted. "Let us see what your scratched armor can do." The crowd cheered, calling for a duel. The instructor nodded slowly, agreeing to the challenge. Ryan gave a quiet nod and stepped into the combat circle. The circle hummed with energy and the warriors gathered around. Karen's armor gleamed as its systems came alive, boosting his strength and speed. Ryan's armor made no sound, no light. It was just silent metal. The difference was clear, and everyone expected the human to be defeated quickly. The signal flashed and Karen charged forward. He was fast, his armored fists cutting through the air with force that could crush stone. But to his shock, Ryan moved aside at the last moment, his motion smooth and controlled. Karen missed and stumbled slightly, the ground cracking beneath his feet. The human didn't attack immediately. He waited, watching Karen's stance, his balance, the way his armor moved. Then Ryan stepped in, deflecting Karen's next punch with one hand and striking his shoulder in the same motion. The alien's armor rang like a bell, sending him a few steps back. Karen growled and attacked again, harder, faster, using all his power. Sparks flew as his strikes hit the ground and air, but never the human. Ryan was always one step away, moving like he had already seen the attack before it happened. It wasn't speed, it was experience. Finally, Karen tried a heavy strike that could break through walls, but Ryan caught his arm, twisted slightly, and the young warrior was on the ground before he even understood how. His weapon fell from his hand, his armor's power flickering. The crowd went silent. Ryan stepped closer and extended his hand. "Get up," he said calmly. Karen hesitated, expecting mockery. But there was none in the human's eyes, only patience. He took the hand and stood up slowly, his pride burning, yet something else stirring inside. "You are fast," Ryan said, "but you rely too much on that shell. One day it will fail. When that happens, will you still fight?" Karen didn't answer. His voice was stuck in his throat. Around them, the crowd stayed silent, unsure what to think. They had never seen anyone move like that without a powered suit. The instructor ended the match, but the air was still thick with tension. As Ryan walked away quietly, Karen looked down at his shining armor, then at the dull, scarred armor the human wore. For the first time, he wondered if strength came from something more than technology. The laughter that had filled the training field in the morning was gone now. The warriors whispered to each other, their eyes following the human as he disappeared into the shadows of the camp. Karen's pride hurt, but his curiosity burned stronger. He had mocked the human's armor, but now he wanted to know what kind of world could make a being fight like that, with calmness, without fear, and without needing to prove anything. That night, as the twin suns sank behind the horizon, Karen stood alone in the empty field. The wind howled softly, brushing over the cracked floor where he had fallen. His reflection in the metal ground looked smaller somehow. For the first time, he didn't feel like laughing. He whispered to himself, "Who are you, human?" The next morning, the camp was quiet. The usual laughter and boasting of the Zaurak warriors were missing. Everyone was talking about the strange human who had defeated Karen without using advanced armor or heavy weapons. Some called it luck. Others whispered that maybe the stories about humans being born on death worlds were true. Karen sat alone beside the weapon racks, staring at his polished gauntlet. The surface still had a mark where the human had struck it. He touched it with his clawed fingers and remembered the sound of the hit, the echo that had shaken through his whole arm. It wasn't just strength. It was something else. The human had fought with calm eyes, without hate, without showing off. That unsettled Karen more than losing itself. Soon the sound of boots on metal made him turn. Captain Ryan Hale walked across the ground, carrying a heavy crate of tools on his shoulder. He looked like he hadn't slept, his armor still bearing scratches from the duel, but he moved as if the weight meant nothing. He placed the crate down near a damaged practice drone and began to work, using a wrench and old tools, not even calling for the repair bots. Karen watched him silently, trying to understand. The other aliens avoided the human. They didn't know what to say to someone who had broken their pride so easily. But Karen felt something pulling him closer, something he didn't like but couldn't ignore. He walked over slowly and stopped a few feet away. "Human," Karen said. "Why do you fix machines with your hands when drones could do it faster?" Ryan didn't look up. "Because drones don't learn." "Hands do," Karen frowned. "That makes no sense." Ryan smiled faintly. "It will one day." Karen crossed his arms. "You fight without lights, without systems, without fear. How? Your armor is weak. It has no power field." The human finally looked at him. His eyes were steady. "Armor protects the body. Discipline protects the soul. Which one do you think breaks first in battle?" Karen didn't answer. The question hung in the air, heavy and strange. He wanted to argue, but something deep inside told him the human was right. Later that day, the training began again. The instructor assigned pairs for combat drills, but the mood was different. Every warrior was more cautious, more observant. When Ryan walked into the field again, nobody laughed. They all watched him carefully. Karen was paired with another trainee, a proud female named Zira. She whispered as they prepared their stance. "Don't think too much about yesterday. He is just an old soldier with tricks." Karen didn't respond. When the signal began, they fought hard, but his mind was not on Zira's moves. He kept thinking about how the human had moved, calm and simple. He began to imitate that stillness. He waited, measured, and struck only when needed. His blows landed with perfect timing, surprising Zira and ending the duel quickly. Ryan was watching from the side. He gave a single nod of approval before walking away. That small gesture made Karen feel a strange spark of pride. That evening, storms rolled in from the northern ridges. The twin suns sank behind dark clouds and lightning crawled across the sky. The camp lights flickered as strong winds hit the valley. Training was canceled, and the warriors gathered in the main hall drinking and boasting again, trying to forget their unease. Ryan sat near the edge, quietly polishing his weapon. His rifle was old, its surface dull and worn, but he cleaned it with care as if it were sacred. Karen couldn't resist. He walked over again and sat across from him. "You never told me," Karen said, his tone quieter now. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Ryan didn't look up. "Earth?" Karen tilted his head. "Your world. I've heard it's dangerous." Ryan finally met his eyes. "Dangerous?" "Yes. Every day you wake up and something tries to kill you. Storms, animals, diseases, gravity itself. That's where I learned that fear is useless. You can't fight nature, so you adapt. You keep going." Karen looked at him in silence. There was no pride in Ryan's words, only truth. "Your world makes warriors like that?" Karen asked. Ryan shrugged. "It makes survivors. The difference is small but important." The thunder outside grew louder. The lights dimmed for a moment, and in that brief darkness, Karen felt something he had not felt before. A quiet respect. This human was not trying to prove anything. He had already survived worse than any of them could imagine. When the storm eased, Karen stood up. "I want to train under you," he said suddenly. Ryan raised his eyebrows. "Your instructors won't like that." "I don't care," Karen replied. "I want to learn what makes you fight the way you do." Ryan studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Meet me at dawn. And bring no armor. Karen blinked in confusion. No armor? The ground cuts like glass in the morning. Ryan's voice was calm. Then you'll learn to walk without bleeding. Karen didn't know if it was madness or wisdom, but he agreed. That night, while others slept, Karen lay awake staring at his shining armor beside his bed. For the first time, it didn't look like strength to him. It looked like a cage, something that made him forget how to rely on himself. El armor was set aside on a rock. He wore simple training clothes, his face calm and his posture straight. His breath made soft clouds in the morning air. You came, Ryan said without turning around. Karen stopped a few steps away. You told me to. Ryan nodded. Good. Most talk about courage but never arrive when it's cold. Karen didn't reply. He noticed the human's hands scarred, rough and steady. Those were not the hands of someone born into peace. They were the hands of someone who had built, fought, and survived. Ryan gestured toward the open field. Today you'll learn to move without the shell. You'll learn what your body can do without help. Karen frowned. Our armor is part of our power. Without it, we are weaker. Ryan shook his head slowly. Without it, you find out if you have any power at all. They began the training. At first, it was simple. Running, climbing, rolling on the uneven ground. But soon it became harder. The sharp stones cut into Karen's feet and the wind burned his face. His breathing grew heavy. Ryan moved ahead easily, each motion smooth and controlled. He didn't rush, didn't show off, but he never stopped. Hours passed under the rising suns. Karen stumbled again and again, his legs aching. Ryan kept watching him silently. Whenever Karen fell, the human would say the same quiet line. Get up. By the fifth fall, Karen snapped. This is foolish, he shouted. Why suffer when we have machines to help us? Ryan's voice was calm but strong. Because machines break. Because storms destroy armor. Because one day you'll be alone with nothing but your own will. And that's when you'll see who you really are. Karen clenched his fists. The words hit deep. He didn't want to admit it, but he understood. He got up again, slower this time, but determined. He followed Ryan through the dust until the suns reached high above. When they finally stopped, Karen collapsed onto the sand, panting. Ryan handed him a small canteen of water. You did better than I expected. Karen drank deeply, his chest still heaving. You humans. You never stop, do you? Ryan smiled faintly. Stopping is a luxury most of us can't afford. They sat in silence for a while. The desert stretched endlessly before them. In the distance, storm clouds began to gather. Karen looked at Ryan's armor lying on the rock. It looked lifeless now, just a shell of metal. The real strength sat beside him, breathing quietly. He turned to the human. Tell me something. Why do your people fight? What do you protect with all this pain? Ryan looked at the horizon. We fight because we remember. Our world taught us early that life is fragile. We lost things many times, cities, families, even whole continents. But every time someone stood back up. That's what humans do. We get up. Karen listened quietly. There was no pride in the human's tone, only truth spoken from experience. Maybe, Karen said softly. We forgot that lesson. Our armor made us lazy. Ryan picked up a handful of sand, letting it run through his fingers. Armor protects the body, yes. But comfort weakens the spirit. The universe doesn't care how advanced your suit is. It only respects those who keep moving when everything falls apart. Lightning flickered far away, and thunder rolled through the valley. The first drops of rain began to fall, hissing on the hot sand. Ryan stood up and motioned for Karen to do the same. The storm's coming. We train until it hits. First time he felt alive. His blood burned with energy. The storm was trying to crush him, but he was still standing. By the time the storm passed, both were soaked and covered in mud. The training ground was a mess of broken rocks and puddles. Karen dropped to his knees, exhausted but smiling faintly. Ryan looked down at him with quiet approval. You did well, Ryan said. You didn't give up. Karen looked up. You're not like the stories we were told. They said humans were fragile. Ryan laughed softly. We are, but we learned to be strong anyway. The word stayed in Karen's mind long after Ryan walked away. That night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Karen sat beside his shining armor and touched it gently. It no longer felt like protection, it felt like a lie. He whispered to himself, I want to be like him. Not the armor. The man inside it. The next day began calm, but something in the air felt strange. The sky over the valley was too quiet, and even the wind carried a heavy stillness. Karen could sense tension spreading across the training camp. Soldiers spoke in low voices, and the instructors kept checking their scanners. Ryan was repairing a damaged drone when a sharp alarm broke the silence. Red lights flashed across the field and the ground trembled under heavy vibrations. From the northern ridge, a wave of dark shapes appeared through the dust, large insect-like creatures moving fast, their armor gleaming wet in the sunlight. The command tower's voice shouted through the speakers. Unknown swarm detected. All warriors prepare for defense. Karan rushed to his station. His hands shook slightly as he sealed himself inside his bright blue exosuit. The armor came alive with humming energy and glowing lines. Around him, the others armed themselves with plasma rifles and shields. But deep inside, Karen remembered Ryan's words. Armor breaks, courage does not. Ryan arrived last. His armor looked the same as before, dull, scratched, and old. Yet his face was calm. He spoke in a steady voice. Form defensive line. Hold your ground. Aim for the legs, not the body. They'll collapse faster. The alien soldiers obeyed, though many looked uncertain. When the creatures came close enough to see, fear rippled through the group. Each beast was twice the height of a human, with hard shell plates and sharp limbs that could cut through metal. The swarm struck like a storm. Plasma fire filled the air and the battlefield turned bright with explosions. The creatures screamed, crashing against the defense line. The ground shook as claws tore through the front shields. Karen fired again and again, but one of the beasts hit him, sending him flying backward. His armor absorbed most of the hit, but the impact broke part of his left shoulder plate. He landed hard, gasping for breath. Around him, chaos reigned. The communication lines went down, and the suits started flickering as the magnetic storm from the creature's energy field spread across the camp. Karen tried to stand, but his armor locked. The system was failing. He shouted into his helmet, "System reboot. Manual override." But the screen only flashed red warnings. The armor that once made him powerful had become a prison. Then, through the smoke and flashing lights, he saw a figure moving toward him. Ryan. The human ran through the battlefield without hesitation, his armor sparking from several hits. He didn't even try to shoot. Instead, he reached Karen, grabbed the broken shoulder plate and tore it free with his hands. "Your armor's dead," Ryan shouted over the noise. "Move," Karen tried to protest. "I can't!" The servo joints. Ryan slammed a hand on the suit's control plate, forcing an emergency release. The chest plate fell open and the internal system shut down. Ryan pulled Karen out by the arm. "Forget the armor. You're faster without it." The storm grew worse. Lightning struck close, shaking the ground. Ryan pushed Karen behind a pile of rocks as a wave of acid mist rolled through the air. The human's armor was burning, yet he didn't stop. He lifted his weapon and fired with short, sharp bursts, hitting the creatures in their weak joints. Each shot was precise, calm, and deliberate. Karen watched in shock. The human's armor was half melted, the left arm unit completely destroyed, but he still stood his ground. Every time a creature came close, Ryan struck it down. He moved like a machine made of muscle and instinct. Karen's fear began to fade, replaced by awe. The human wasn't just fighting, he was enduring. Even when a claw hit his back and sparks burst from the armor, he kept going. "Why don't you retreat?" Aaron shouted. Ryan reloaded calmly. "Because someone has to hold the line." Karen grabbed a fallen rifle and joined him, fighting shoulder to shoulder. Without the armor, every movement hurt, but he didn't stop. He remembered Ryan's words during training. "When the armor fails, find your courage." Together they pushed forward, covering retreating soldiers and driving the swarm back toward the ridge. The battle lasted for hours until the final explosion tore through the enemy line. The creatures fell, twitching and burning in the sand. When silence returned, the camp was half destroyed. Smoke rose from the defense towers. The medical teams rushed across the field, searching for survivors. Karen looked around and found Ryan lying near the rocks, his armor cracked open, steam rising from the joints. Karen ran to him and dropped to his knees. "You're hurt." Ryan's voice was weak but steady. "Nothing new." Karen tried to help remove the heavy armor pieces. As he did, he froze. Beneath the broken plates were deep scars, old burns, claw marks, and long-healed wounds. Every inch of his body carried the history of countless battles. Karen's breath caught in his throat. He had thought the human strength came from his armor, but now he saw the truth. The armor was only a shell. The real steel was the man beneath it. Ryan opened his eyes and looked at him. "Now you understand," he said softly. "We don't fight because we're strong. We fight because we have to." Karen bowed his head, his voice quiet. "You're not like any warrior I've ever met." Ryan smiled faintly. "You'll be better." The medics arrived and carried Ryan away. Karen sat in the ruins, staring at his broken armor lying nearby. For the first time it looked meaningless. He realized that everything he had believed about strength was wrong. The shining suits, the power systems, they were tools. The real power was the will to stand when everything else was gone. That night, while the camp burned under the silver light of the moons, Karen made a silent promise. He would never again laugh at weakness, never again depend on armor to prove his worth. He would learn what it meant to be truly strong, like the human who stood against a storm and never gave up. The night after the battle was long and quiet. The camp that once echoed with laughter now felt like a graveyard. Fires burned in the distance where defense towers had fallen. The air smelled of smoke, metal, and storm. Karen walked through the wreckage with slow steps, his armor hanging from his hands in broken pieces. Every step reminded him of what had happened, the chaos, the screams, and the sight of the human standing alone against the swarm. In the medical tent, lights flickered dimly. Inside, wounded soldiers lay in silence. Ryan was there too, resting on a narrow bed. His armor had been removed completely and placed beside him, dented, burned, and nearly destroyed. His body was covered in scars, old and new. Some wounds were wrapped in bandages, others still healing. Yet his face was calm, as if pain was something he had learned to ignore long ago. Karen stood by the doorway for a while, unsure if he should enter. He wasn't used to feeling small, but now he did. Finally, Ryan opened his eyes and said quietly, "You're still standing there, Karen." Karen stepped closer. "You should be resting, human." Ryan gave a weak smile. "Humans rest when the job is done. This one isn't." Karen looked at the broken armor beside the bed. "That suit saved lives today." Ryan turned his head toward the armor. "No," he said softly. "It's just metal. What saved lives was the will of those who didn't run." Karen said nothing. The words felt heavy, more powerful than any command. He remembered how Ryan had fought when all machines failed. The image of the human pulling him from the wreckage was burned in his mind. "You could have died," Karen finally said. "Why risk yourself for us?" Ryan looked up at him. "Because you're soldiers. Because next time I might not be there, and you'll have to stand on your own." Karen's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to him like that. The humans he had heard about were supposed to be fragile, soft, emotional, but this one was none of those things. He was quiet strength forged by pain. After a moment, Ryan motioned toward the edge of his bed. "Sit. You've got questions. Ask." Karen sat down slowly. "Back home, we are taught that strength comes from power, armor, weapons, control. But you fight differently. You fight like it doesn't matter if you win or lose." Ryan nodded slightly. "That's because for us, survival isn't about winning. It's about refusing to die easy. Every time we fall, we rise again. It's how our world shaped us." Karen frowned, curious. "You said your world is dangerous. What's it really like?" Ryan's eyes went distant, as if seeing far away. "Earth is beautiful, but deadly. The storms are fierce, the animals are strong, the air itself can kill you if you breathe it wrong in some places. But it's home. We learn to adapt, to endure. That's why no one understands us. They see fragile skin, but not the will beneath it." Karen listened silently, his respect deepening with every word. Ryan's voice grew softer. "When I joined the army, I thought armor made me brave. Then I lost it once, on a mission where everything went wrong. I survived because I stopped depending on it. That's when I learned. The body can break, the armor can burn, but the will is stronger than both." Karen lowered his head. "I understand now. My people forgot that lesson." Ryan looked at him closely. "Then learn it again. Teach it to others." Outside, the sound of wind brushed against the tent, carrying with it the smell of rain. Karen sat in silence for a while before he spoke again. "You know, when I first saw you, I laughed. I thought you were weak. But I was wrong." Ryan gave a small smile. "You weren't the first. Won't be the last. People always laugh until they see what humans can do when the odds are against them." Karen stood up slowly. "When you heal, you'll train me again?" Ryan nodded. "If I can still stand, I will. But remember, The next lesson doesn't come from me. It comes from you when you face something you can't escape. Karen saluted him in the Zarek way, pressing his fist to his chest. I will not forget what you showed me. Ryan's eyes softened. Good. That means I did my job. Karen turned to leave but paused at the door. He looked back once more. The human was already half asleep, his breathing slow but steady. For a brief moment, Karen felt something strange, like pride, but deeper. It was respect mixed with gratitude, the kind that could never be spoken in words. Outside, the camp was quiet again. The other warriors moved among the ruins, repairing what they could. When Karen passed them, some nodded at him, whispering softly about the human who fought the swarm. Their laughter was gone. In its place was something new: admiration. Karen went to the training field where the sand still bore marks of the battle. He dropped his broken armor to the ground and looked up at the twin moons. His reflection in the cracked metal showed someone changed, not the proud boy who had mocked a human, but a warrior who had seen what real courage looked like. He clenched his fist and whispered, Tomorrow I train again, but this time I train like a human. The night wind carried his voice across the valley. It was quiet but strong, and it carried a promise that the Zarek warriors would never be the same again. The sun rose over the valley again, painting the sky in pale orange light. The smell of smoke still lingered, but the camp was slowly returning to order. The soldiers were busy repairing damaged towers, setting up new defense lines and burying their fallen comrades. For the first time, Karen felt the weight of what it truly meant to be a warrior. It was not about pride or shiny armor or rank. It was about surviving and protecting others no matter the cost. Ryan was walking again. His wounds were healing, though his left arm was still stiff from the battle. The medics told him to rest, but he didn't. He spent his days helping others rebuild, teaching, and fixing equipment. Every time Karen saw him, the human was doing something useful, something that made the others stop and watch. That morning, Karen approached him. He was no longer wearing his broken armor. Instead, he wore simple training clothes, just like the human. Ryan noticed him and smiled faintly. You ready? He asked. Karen nodded. I want to learn more. You said the next lesson would come from me, but I still don't understand how. Ryan picked up a handful of sand and let it fall slowly through his fingers. You'll understand soon. Today we train again, but not with weapons, not with armor, just your body and your mind. Karen followed him to the training field. It was still scarred from the battle, filled with cracks and scorch marks. The other warriors watched curiously from a distance. They wanted to see what kind of training the human had in mind. Ryan started by showing simple movements, stances, breathing patterns, ways to balance the body against uneven ground. Karen copied him, but his movements were heavy and unsteady. Ryan corrected him gently. Slow down. Breathe. Let your body move with the ground, not against it. Hours passed under the heat. Sweat dripped from Karen's face, his arms aching, his feet bleeding from the rough surface. But he didn't stop. Ryan watched him with quiet approval. When Karen fell, he only said one word. Again. And Karen got up, again and again. Each time his body screamed to stop, he remembered Ryan in the storm, standing against the swarm when his armor was burning. That image gave him strength. By the time the sun reached its highest point, Karen was exhausted. He collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. Ryan sat beside him quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved softly through the ruins, and the only sound was their breathing. Finally, Ryan said, Do you know why I make you train like this? Karen shook his head. Ryan looked toward the horizon. Because one day no one will be there to help you. No armor, no orders, no safety, only you. And when that day comes, if you've learned to stand on your own, you'll survive anything. Karen listened carefully. The words felt simple, but they carried a power that reached deep into him. Ryan continued, his voice calm. The universe doesn't reward strength. It rewards those who don't give up. That's what humanity learned a long time ago. Karen turned to look at him. You said your people come from a death world. Is that what made you this way? Ryan smiled a little. Partly. But it's more than that. Every human learns early that pain and fear don't end until you face them. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because something out there always tries to take what we love. Karen looked down at his hands. They were cut and bruised. But he didn't feel weak. For the first time, he understood what it meant to earn strength rather than wear it. As the day went on, more warriors joined their training, curious at first, then inspired. They removed their armor too, following Ryan's example, the field filled with the sound of effort, grunts, breaths, and the dull thud of bodies hitting the sand. No one complained. They trained until the suns began to set. That evening, the camp gathered around the fire. Ryan stood with Karen and the others. The flames danced against their faces. One of the younger warriors asked, "Why do humans fight when it hurts so much?" Ryan thought for a moment before answering. "Because if we don't fight, we lose everything. Pain doesn't scare us. Losing hope does." The aliens listened in silence. Even the instructors said nothing. Karen felt a strange warmth in his chest. Not pride, not arrogance, but a kind of peace. Later that night, when everyone returned to their tents, Karen stayed behind. The field was quiet, the air cool. He looked up at the stars, millions of them shining above. Somewhere out there, he knew, was Earth, the death world that created beings like Ryan. He spoke softly to the wind. "You showed me that armor isn't what makes a warrior. The will is." From behind, Ryan's voice came. "That's the truth of it." Karen turned and smiled. "You heard me?" Ryan nodded, walking closer. "You were speaking loudly enough for the stars." They both laughed quietly. It was the first time Karen had laughed since the day he met Ryan. Ryan put a hand on his shoulder. "Tomorrow you'll lead the training. Teach them what you've learned. A warrior who learns alone is only half complete." Karen's eyes widened. "Me, lead?" Ryan nodded. "You're ready." Karen stood there surprised but proud. "I'll do my best," Ryan smiled. "That's all a human ever does. Their best. And it's usually enough." As the night deepened, the two stood together under the starlight. The camp around them slept, unaware that something had changed forever. The proud warriors of Zorak were no longer laughing at the human. They were learning from him, and Karen, once the loudest mocker, now carried the fire of humanity inside him. The will to fight, to rise and to never give up even when the armor was gone. The next morning was quiet. The wind carried the smell of ash and metal, but the camp no longer felt broken. Something inside it had changed. The alien warriors were no longer loud or proud for no reason. They worked together, trained together, and moved with purpose. In the center of it all stood Karen, the young warrior who once mocked the human. Ryan watched from the side, his arms crossed, as Karen led the drills. The aliens now trained without armor, using their own strength and balance. Their movements were rough but filled with new determination. Each fall ended with someone shouting the word Ryan had taught them. "Again." Ryan smiled faintly. It reminded him of his own training years ago on Earth, on the burning plains of his homeworld where soldiers were forged through pain and willpower. He never expected to see the same fire in alien eyes, but there it was now, in Karen and the others. As the day went on, dark clouds began to form again over the ridges. The warning sirens echoed through the camp. Scouts rushed in, shouting, "The swarm is returning. Bigger this time." The air grew tense. Warriors grabbed weapons and armor, but the systems were still unstable from the last battle. Karen turned toward Ryan. "We can't stop them like before. The defenses are weak." Ryan nodded slowly. "Then we fight smarter. Fall back to the canyon line. Use the terrain to slow them." Karen gave the orders quickly, his voice strong. No one questioned him. The aliens moved with discipline and focus, setting up a defense inside the narrow valley. The wind howled through the rocks as the first signs of the swarm appeared. Thousands of insect-like beasts crawling down the hills, their screeches filling the sky. Ryan tightened the straps on his battered armor. The metal groaned but held together. Karen stepped beside him, wearing no armor this time, only his training clothes and a rifle. "You're really going out there again?" he asked. Ryan smiled. "Of course. Someone has to lead from the front." Karen shook his head. "Then I'm coming too." Ryan glanced at him. "You sure about that?" "No armor this time." Karen's eyes were calm. "I don't need it." Ryan gave a small nod. "Good answer." The battle began with thunder. Plasma fire streaked across the canyon as the swarm crashed into the first defense line. The creatures were larger and faster than before, their shells glowing with strange energy. The ground shook as their claws tore into the barricades. Ryan and Karen fought side by side, their movements sharp and precise. Ryan's shots hit weak points every time. Karen followed his rhythm perfectly, moving just like the human had taught him. Patient, steady, without fear. But the swarm was endless. The creatures poured in wave after wave. The defense line started to break. Karen shouted to the others to fall back. But one of the young soldiers was trapped under debris. Without thinking, Karen ran through the chaos to pull him free. A beast lunged toward him, its claws cutting through the air. Before it could strike, Ryan appeared, slamming into it with full force. His armor cracked under the impact, sparks bursting out. The creature fell, but Ryan stumbled, breathing hard. Karen helped him stand. "You're hurt!" Ryan grinned weakly. It's nothing new. They both laughed even as the battle raged. Together, they fought their way back toward the ridge. The soldiers saw them and found new courage. They shouted louder, fought harder. The line began to push forward again. Hours passed before the last of the swarm fell. The field was silent except for the sound of wind and distant thunder. The ground was covered with broken shells and smoke. The sun began to rise again through the clouds, lighting the battlefield in soft gold. Karen looked around at the survivors. Many were wounded, but they were standing. He turned to Ryan, who was sitting on a rock, his armor finally giving up. One arm plate fell off with a loud clang. Karen knelt beside him. "It's over," he said quietly. Ryan nodded. "For now." "You did well, Karen. You led them. They followed you because you earned it." Karen looked at the cracked armor. "This armor, it should be repaired." Ryan smiled faintly. "No, let it stay broken. It tells a story." Karen was silent for a moment. "You taught us how to fight without fear. You changed us." Ryan's voice softened. "No, Karen. You changed yourself. You found what was already inside." The two sat in silence, watching the light spread across the valley. The camp below was alive again. Voices calling, laughter returning, not from arrogance this time, but from victory earned through unity. When Ryan finally stood, Karen helped him put his old helmet back on. The human looked across the valley one last time before saying, "You'll do fine without me. Keep teaching them. Keep the fire alive." Karen frowned. "You're leaving?" Ryan nodded. "I go where I'm needed. There's always another fight somewhere. That's what we do." Karen lowered his head in respect. "Then may the stars guide you, Captain." Ryan smiled and extended his hand. Karen took it firmly, their grip strong and silent. In that moment, no words were needed. As Ryan walked away toward the horizon, the twin suns rose higher, their light glinting off the ruined armor still lying in the dust. Karen looked down at it and whispered, "He fought with metal once, but his true armor was his heart." He turned toward the camp where the young warriors were waiting for his orders. The human's lessons lived in each of them now. Karen stood tall, his voice steady as he called out to his soldiers, "Train hard, stand strong. When the storm comes again, we won't need armor, we'll have each other." The crowd shouted in agreement, their voices echoing through the valley. The Zorak warriors had changed forever, and it began with one man from a faraway world. A human who taught them that real strength is not in the armor you wear, but in the courage that lives beneath it. Far in the distance, Ryan Hale disappeared into the light, his figure fading like a ghost of legend. But his words remained, carved into every warrior's heart. Armor breaks, courage does not.